introduce yourself and your full name?
All right, well, my full name is Christopher Rolinson, and I'm a professor of journalism at Point Park.
Nice. So when did you join the service?
Well, I joined the service about a year after high school. I went to college for a year, and it didn't work out so well. So I needed something else to do, and I needed out of my parents' house. I needed out of Beaver County. So that really was kind of what drove me to do it. I didn't really have I really wasn't driven by any sense of patriotism or anything like that. It just as I just needed I needed to get into a part of something that was a little bit bigger than where I was at. So that's kind of what I felt like when I was there.
Interesting. Are you from a military family? Was anyone in your family ever in the military?
Oh yeah, yeah. My grandfather was in the military, and my dad was in the military, and yeah. So and I have uncles on my mother's side that were there too. So it's not we're not I'm not unfamiliar with that. Yeah. So we've have a little history of service. Yes.
Oh. What was your job in the military and what part of it were you in?
Well, I was in the army, and I had two gigs, and one when I was on active duty was a communications system specialist, and I thought when I joined that that was going to be more like communicating like radio, being on the radio and doing more media things, but it turned out it was a mechanic's job like for fixing radios. And that wasn't a problem either. I mean, I was interested in doing that too. Um, but then when I was there, since my job was to be in charge of communication systems, that meant that I had a top secret clearance to hold on to communications keys that were given out to to helicopters that were in the unit that I was in. And so that put me, because I was in an aviation unit, that put me in a different, like, if I had been in a tank unit or something else like that, it would have been a little bit different. But because I was working with helicopters, that kind of put me in what they called an avionics job, which so those were the kind of the two things that I did when I was on active duty. And then I spent about 3 years doing that, and then I got out of the active duty and went to the Pennsylvania National Guard, Army National Guard, and then from there, I actually was a helicopter mechanic when I was with them. So, and I did that for about 2 years, 2.5 years.
So did you have to just pick up those skills of being a mechanic, or did you?
Well, all of the things, when you join the military, they assume you know nothing, and that's a good, it's a good place to start. So, just to kind of, if you're not familiar with the process, what happens is um, you join up, you go to Pittsburgh, you go to the recruiter station, and and you put your name on the line and everything there. Then you go home, and you get yourself ready. And about 3 or 4 weeks later, they bring you back down, and then you depart from Pittsburgh. They put you on a bus. You go out to the airport, and then they fly you to wherever it is you're going. And then there's people who are from the military that kind of meet you there along the way, and then and then from there you go to basic training for 8 weeks. And mine basic training was at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, in the middle of winter. It was not fun. Um, and then and then after that you'll go to your job. You'll go learn your job skill, and that can range from anywhere from 8 weeks to 2 years, depending on what skill you have. And then you get into your then you go on and you get into your unit at that point. Now,
Do you think going into that part of the military, did that give you any inspiration or tell you something that you wanted to become a professor or get into journalism or communications? Was there any correlation there?
um, a little bit, for sure, because like, my origin story in journalism, when I was like, I don't know, I think I was, how old are you when you're in eighth grade? Like 14,
Yeah,
13,
14, probably 13, 14.
somewhere in there. So when I was 13 or 14, I got a paper route. So I always tell people, oh, I've been in journalism since I've been a teenager, right? And
My
then
dad
even
has a paper route too.
Yeah, and then even before that, I remember as a kid like writing up like fake newspapers to talk about, like what was going on in the world. Like Ronald Reagan was president, and there was like a war. Like, oh, there was a war, right? Like there hasn't ever like not been a war, but this would, And I remember writing up like little articles about that, and like in a paper, and I just showed my parents that.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it's been something I've been into forever. But then when I joined the military, I definitely wanted to be in a field that was, communications field that involved radios because, my family, my dad for forever was a amateur radio operator. And so, I mean, that's been like, talking on the radio has been something that has been like, I've been doing that my entire life. So it's not like a big, it was never a big deal for me to do that. So when I got into the military, I was like, well, I'm familiar with that. I'm kind of comfortable with that already, so let's just do it. Honestly, if I had to do it again, I would have picked a completely different job, but that's where I want. That's where I wound up. So I mean, I got a lot of technical skill from that, and not as much practical on the air kind of thing as I thought I was going to get. Because I don't think where I came from in Beaver County, and with who my parents were, I don't think they really understood it. They really didn't know the difference you know between communication and media. They didn't really make a distinction between any of that. So I don't think their advice was, I don't think they had all the information to give me good advice about what job to pick. Except all they said was don't be an infantryman. That was the only advice I got. It was like don't be a gun guy. So yeah.
But you kind of touched a little bit on one of my questions I was going to ask later. If you had the choice to do it all over again, would you do it differently?
I would definitely do it differently, and I would pick a different job. I would have picked a different job from the start, honestly. Um, but I would do it again. If the situation were the same. I mean, if I were in, had to do it over again, I would do it again. But if you were to fast forward and say, hey, you're in that situation, would you do it today? Absolutely not. Like I would not do it today. Um, you know, and that's for a variety of reasons. Mainly I think because I got older and learned a lot more about what the military is actually for, and I sort of I sort of kind of am in fundamental opposition to to what it's been used for the past you know probably 100 and probably since probably since the Spanish American War, the military's been used in the wrong way, and so and I didn't realize that until I was well out of it. But yeah, I would do it again in my situation, but if I were there today, I probably would do something else.
How long were you in the military for?
Well, there's a couple of ways that it works, right? So you sign up, and everybody who signs up is in for 8 years. So you're on their list. Like there's a database that you're in, and you're in that database for 8 years. And then whatever then there's other statuses within that. So I was on active duty for about 3 years, and a little longer than 3 years. And then I was in the National Guard, Pennsylvania National Guard, for about 2.5 years. And then I was on a list for the remaining like 2 years and 4 months or whatever. And all that list was just that hey, if there was something that happened, um, and we need you, we'll call you back. And you have to report. So basically, so everybody gets an 8 year term, but my active time in it was about 3 and a half years. Then my National Guard time was about 2.5, and then the inactive was the third part. So they like how that would work is that they would be like if there were, like I know it's during September 11th this happened. Like so people were leaving, or had just gotten out, and they started to call people back. They said, well, okay, well you can't leave yet. You still owe us a year and a half, so we'd like you to come back. And people had to do people had to do that. Um, so that's part of the 8 year deal. That's what everybody gets.
Um, what did you find most challenging when you were serving?
I think really kind of just figuring out how to be an adult in some way. I, remember that time of life as being, I remember being very disconnected. I didn't really have a good sense of self at that point in time. I didn't really, I couldn't say, I still had a very high school mindset. And so
Yeah.
I think what you had to overcome first was to try to just strip away all that stuff, and that's what basic training tries to do. Is they just try to get rid of all the the noise, and the brain clouds and all that other stuff that gets head noise, head trash that gets in the way of all that. So I think that was the hardest thing, was to just kind of like give up on who you thought you were, and then just kind of moving into this new you. Yeah.
Yeah, and at such a young age, like right out of high school, I couldn't imagine having a full-time anything.
Yeah. Well, it was formative, that's for sure. I mean,
Mhm.
I have two boys, and I'm not recommending that they do the same thing as for me. I mean, it's like my situation just with my parents and my home life, and just what I was doing, who I was hanging out with. I mean, it made all the sense in the world to just leave the situation I was in. But like my kids don't have nearly the same
Mhm.
uh, you know, family problems or family issues that I had as a kid growing up. And I didn't even realize it. You don't even, like, until you're 25 years later, you don't
Mhm.
realize, like, wow, man, my parents were messed up,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
So,
Do you have any good or fun memories while being in the service?
yeah, I mean, it was generally a positive experience, and I get that question a lot about, like, hey, was it a good time, or whatnot, and it was. I mean, I think that the career field that I picked and the unit that I got into was was based upon a couple of factors: the fact that I did well on the tests, and getting into the military, and just kind of scoring well in the program. That I think that because of that I got a cherry assignment. So my full-time assignment when I was on active duty was I went from Fort Sill, Oklahoma, to a base in Georgia to get to school, and then I was assigned to that aviation unit, which was kind of special in my mind. I think because the job that I did worked. You could apply it to any military unit, like any Army unit that was out there. There was a position in any one of those units for a person that did what I did, which was control the communication systems for the
Mhm.
commander. But so, like, for example, if I were in an infantry unit, which would be basically be on the ground and walking and doing all that stuff. I would be standing right next to the commander,
Yeah.
and that would I'd be carrying his radio, right? And so, like, you
Mhm.
can imagine that, like, with the way things work, that makes any kind of, like, that RF transmitter, that makes you a target. So naturally they're going to try to go after and blow that up and kill that, because that's a communication point. And so what was good about the unit that I was in is basically my commander was in a helicopter, so I fixed his helicopter up, and then he took off and flew away, and so all the communication system went with him, and I'm left, like, at the base with just a stationary device that can be read, but it's by no means like as threatening as it would have been if it were to have been if I'd have been standing next to the commander. So I mean, so because of that, that made everything kind of real chill, because there was, like, I had no worries about, like, I wasn't going to get in a plane crash, I wasn't going to get shot at, like, none of that was going to happen to me. So I think it made my time and all the people who were with me a lot less stressful, because there just wasn't it just at that point in time, and we didn't go to war at all when I was there, but it just felt like that, there was, like, not a lot that was going to happen, to us because
Mhm.
of where we were, what we were going to do. So,
Do you still communicate with the men that you were with or women?
um, I am Facebook friends with, I want to say, two soldiers that I was friends with, and believe it or not, I was actually close to one of my friends and his wife. So there's I'm actually closer to the wife than him at this point, just from interacting on Facebook. That's all. And so I'd say, yeah, there's about three people that I'm in touch with from that time of my life.
Going off of that, what was it like when you returned home and kind of your adjustment back into the everyday life?
Ah, that's a wild question. That's good. Well, I'd say that, I don't know. I felt pretty normal, but I went, from there I went to college, and so I went to community college at Beaver County for a year. But what was crazy was is that I showed up, back in my hometown. I had money. I went and got a cool apartment, and I went to school, and then, and so I was like light years ahead of my peers at that point,
Mhm.
of people who I was in class with. So, um, what was the question one more time? I don't want to get kind of off
It
track.
was just kind of your adjustment when you got home.
Right, right, right. And so, I just felt like it was like what I was doing was completely normal, like having, money and party all the time. And, and it was probably not healthy, the way that I operated at that point in my life. But, and I think, my adjustment to back to civilian life didn't feel like it was a change at all. But I think people looked at me like, holy cow, like who are you and where are you coming from? Like, because I think that probably other people were more shocked about what was happening than I was, because I just looked at it. I could just continued on doing whatever I was doing, which, for good or bad, I think that, people without that experience probably encountered me and didn't know how to take where I was coming from or what I was doing. So,
You kind of touched base on this question a little bit earlier when you were saying, if you would do it all over again, you wouldn't do it in the military today, since you've learned about, as you grow older, what it's really about. Would you recommend younger people to join?
hmm. Um, I don't want to tell people to get this, to throw people off their career path, because I mean there are warrior souls, and those folks, that want to do that, and that's their calling. I mean, I wouldn't want to interfere with it, but part of what I would want to interfere with is the fact that, that, like, and I haven't seen it a lot lately, but, in the past 25 years, I mean, the military has taken on, well, I guess they still do. I mean, they've taken on, a huge propaganda campaign, to advertise to people, and they're doing it in subtle ways. Like, they're militarizing, sporting events, and, they're bringing, like, like the celebration of the military, or, like every federal holiday has like turned into like a celebration of the military, and it really shouldn't be. And so, I mean, I would think for the average person, the young person in your age bracket, I would think long and hard about what the military means, before, before doing that. Because I mean, you know we're at a point in history, in world history, and if you're looking at everything that's going on, I mean, we have been in perpetual warfare in some way, shape, or form. Like, with the exception of the last well, I mean, I guess even the United States, within the last 6 months, we're finally not, for I think the entirety of your life probably have not been in a state of war. And then I looked at my life, and there was probably a period of, probably from like 1975, when the Vietnam War ended, until about 1980, when Ronald Reagan became president. There was no war, right? And so for me, looking at the military at that point in time was like, oh, there's not a lot. These things come and they ebb and flow, and there's cycles that come on and go away with it. And I looked at it as an educated risk. I said, well, we're in a low cycle right now. I mean, it could go, but it's not perpetual. But then, fast forward to September 11th, and I mean, and it just went nuts, right? Like, I mean, it was, there was military, there has been a war, and every single day, since 2001. And it's like, when you look at it from that perspective, I'm like, man, like, I mean, if you join the military, you're going to be doing that. And it's like, and so, I mean, that's why I said, like, I mean, if you're the warrior spirit, absolutely go. But if you're just anybody else who's, like me, like, I needed an opportunity, I needed a place to get, just to get out of a situation. I mean, I would have to think twice about doing that today, just because of how often the military is used for inappropriate purposes.
That kind of leads me into my next question. How do you see the military changing in the future? And what kind of change do you actually see it changing?
Well, the current monetary system that we're on, and because we're capitalists here, the role of the military is going to just, do more and more and more of what it's doing right now, which is perpetrating, a capitalistic mission. And as long as we have, as long as we have a fiat money system, and we're bent on every year we must grow and we have to expand the economy, then the role of the military is going to do just that. It's just going to make sure that that happens, right? That's what the point of the military is. So unless we make a fundamental change in our in our monetary system or our economic system, where we change over to like a Bitcoin standard, or we become more socialist, or we kind of tack to the left somehow. I don't see the military doing anything different except maintaining the capitalist structure. That's
Mhm.
it.
Interesting. Leading into the next question, what do you think we will have to do to help bridge the military civilian divide?
Well, that's a tough question, right? You know, so and I think about this, like, in your family, and then I know, I mean, in my family, we can talk about that too, but in your family, was anybody, what was the opinion of the military, in your family? Was it something that your folks did, or your siblings did, or was it more something that, the general idea was that, like, that was other people's kids that joined the military? So how was that for you in your life?
I think it was, I don't know, we never really talked too much about the military. I mean, both of my grandfathers were in the military at one point, but I don't know. I wouldn't say that my parents ever encouraged it or discouraged it. They're very just kind of like, you need to find your own path, but they definitely never like talked about it that much to be like, okay, they're big college people, like,
Yeah.
you got to go to
Well,
college.
yeah, well, I mean, then certainly, then that sounds like it wasn't, anything that, was really, encouraged. I mean, and I don't know, in my family, my mother hated the idea that I was going to join the military. My
Mhm.
dad, I feel like, he wanted me to do it and felt like that was my only way out, but he didn't understand why I picked the career and job that I did. So, I mean, it was definitely a topic in my life. But I think, I look at like, take for example my sister, who has two young kids, and her only experience with the military is having a brother and a father in the military, and she is not encouraging her kids to do that at all. And it's like, that's someone else's job. And
Yeah.
so there's a real, like, the divide in America that comes with it is because it's all volunteer. And so that makes it so that, at that point, you either have to have the warrior spirit, like, this is what you do, this is what you want to do, and this is sort of your calling, like a priesthood, you go do that. um, or it's folks who are completely, at the other end of the spectrum, and have been, and don't have any opportunity within the current system, and and they view this as a way out. And
Mhm.
and I mean, and that's a risk. That's like, well, why are we putting, people in this position where that's the choice that they have to make? It's like, well, if I want to just, like, live on in the same, terrible existence that I am now, drugs and crime, or whatever it is that's happening, just poverty, and then join the military and go do the man's work, and then hopefully, at the end of that,
Yeah.
that I'll find some self-respect. And then, but then, you have a whole group of people in America who are like, yeah, the military, that's wrong. That I don't know why we even have one. And then they're actively discouraging, people from their, socioeconomic class to even consider it. So it becomes a poor person's job, and that's not a good thing. And how do you fix that? There's only one way to fix that, and that's to force everybody to do it.
Mhm.
And I don't really want to be a conscription army, but I do think that if we did that, if we made every person serve a year, um, whether in the military, the Peace Corps, or some other,
Mhm.
AmeriCorps, some other way like that, then your investment in the system is a lot more there, right? Like, so I mean, if it's your body and mind and time at risk, you're going to be all over your lawmakers about making good decisions about, hey, don't put me in a war that doesn't matter for the good of the nation. Why am I fighting this corporate war? Why am I going to defend this
Yeah.
particular thing. I mean, and without an investment or a stake in it, it just, they can do what they can send people, off to war with impunity, and they've demonstrated that they can and will do it. They've done it for 20 years, and
Mhm.
and I don't see that changing in the future. I think we're in a lull right now, but with what's going on in Russia and Ukraine,
Yeah.
I mean, it's only a matter of time before before this goes, and becomes something bigger. Especially if Putin does something dumb. You know,
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I agree with what you were saying about, because I even know so many kids that, you know, their purpose or passion, what they wanted to do was something that they had to go to college for, and they wanted to go to college, but then they had to join the military to be able to have that opportunity because of how, crazy expensive and how college is.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I would say this. I would say that that's was part of my thought process was to
Mhm.
was to get money to go to college because I was out of options. The
Yeah.
first time through, my parents said, we'll pay your way to go to college, and then, but then, whenever I failed out of college and wasted my time and their money, it was like they were like, okay, well, that's done. You're done with that. At least on our dollar. If you want to go to college, you're gonna have to figure out what to do. And I mean, and that's what drove. I mean, that was the final decision maker for me
Mhm.
to do that. Was just all the other things were there, and then it was finally like, okay, I'm going to get my college paid for, to do that. And I mean, without that, I wouldn't be, we wouldn't be having this conversation if it didn't happen that way. I would have totally. I just know that I would have wound up somewhere completely different. I probably would be happy, but I mean, I just wouldn't be here if I didn't do what I did. I'm pretty sure.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I have for you today.
All right. Well, good. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you.